if you're trying to scale any type of business or just grow and do this as a volume, it gets much easier if you have the right systems in place. And, and the systems we were talking about before was that really they have to continually change, whether it's your, processing or insurance or construction and construction management, which I think people really underestimate the flipping business and the amount of like management that goes into it. A lot of people really think that it's more about finding the deals and having that as a system, and so you have a flow of business is really what most people focus on. But the meat and potatoes of the business is actually taking these properties and being able to efficiently get them fixed up quickly and then resold.
I am Christina Suter, and this is the Real Estate Breakthrough Show, where we talk about the reality of real estate, the mindset you need in order to face the reality of what it is, and tips and tricks to get you moving forward in investing. I am your host, Christina Suter. I have Robert Fragoso with me, and I am excited. Deal with it, Brianna. I am using the word excited. My video editor tells me I say excited way too much, but I don't care. I have Robert with me today, and I'm excited because I have known Robert for quite a number of years. As a matter of fact, I think, Robert, we've seen each other mostly at meetings. We were once on a panel together. You may or may not remember this, but you probably do.
I do.
We were once on a panel together. There was an economic panel, and we were talking about where was the interest rate going to go. This was 2015, I believe, or 16. Where was the Fed going to do with interest rates? Would they be forced to increase them? Because of the slowing down that we were seeing, was the Fed going to be forced to take action? And I don't remember which side we each took on whether that was a yes or a no. I know we battled it out, and then we bet a steak dinner. And so as far as I know, Robert, I still owe you a steak dinner, because about 6 months later, I went, you know what? Robert was right and I was wrong, and I owe him a steak dinner.
Yeah, I remember everyone back then was saying that interest rates were going to go up. They had just gone up. It was like December of, it may have been 17 or 18 actually, but it was, but I was thinking that there's no reason it should go completely down the opposite way. And it was I saw it as a temporary issue caused by, what was it back then? It was something specific, I remember, which is why I was like the odd man out. Everybody was like, hey, it's going to definitely change. And, I remember it was the early payoff warnings that no one was paying attention to. And I said, the reason they're raising the rates is because they dropped the rates too quickly, and the trend is that they're going to continue to drop. And so everyone had said rates were going to be at like 6.5, something like that. And I thought they were going to go down into like the low threes, and everyone thought I was crazy.
And you were right.
And I was right. I turned out I was right.
And you were, I think, the only one on the panel that was right. I'm just saying.
Right. I did. That's right.
So that is one level of credibility for you all by itself. Now let me read the bio that I have for you, which is not the bio you sent me. Let me read what I think your bio should read. Robert is a legend in our field for having founded and developed one of the largest hard money loan businesses in the country, founded, developed, and sold. But now you are a consultant, and you enjoy spending your 30 plus years in multiple aspects of real estate, that you've decided to share your expertise to help other people understand how to build, grow their investment business. From networking, acquisitions, financing, valuations, the sales of fix and flip properties, your expertise is deep in all of these areas as a successful investor. As a matter of fact, there's a reason why, in case you guys are listening to this on a podcast instead of listening to this, seeing it on one of my video platforms, there's a reason why Robert is sitting in a car to do our interview today. Well, I'm in my little blue set here, right? I love my little blues, right? My blue hair, my blue background, my blue website. Right? There's a reason why Robert is in his car. Robert, why are you sitting in your car to do our interview today?
Yeah, so I planned on being back at the office in time, and we showed up to one of the properties. Just kind of normal kind of course of seeing if we're missing anything and walking through. And I haven't been to this property in a while, but as we're walking through, we're noticing that like, hey, where is this item? We had like some light fixtures that were missing. So it turns out someone came in and they stole a bunch of stuff. So it took a lot longer while I'm here, we just said, okay, let's figure out what was taken, and we can get it reordered, get it here, because everybody wants to get it done and obviously get it installed. So
yeah,
I'm in my car, and real life is happening.
And real life is real estate life is
No,
happening.
that's
That's
right.
one of the things about the Real Estate Breakthrough Show that we try to make really clear is real estate is successful a lot of the time, but not all of the time. Real estate will somewhere along the way hand you your backside, but there is still a reason to use real estate to break through to your financial success. So we'll get to that question. And I guess you could use today's incident as part of the answer, but I suspect you have juicier stories, but we'll see what happens. So let's talk about when you were at my FIBI meeting, we really focused specifically on business skills in being successful in real estate flipping and purchasing and having multi-unit single family. You are really deep into systems. It's what you felt like make Anchor very successful. It's why you sold it successfully. It's why you are back using your capacity at building systems to do flips and to continue to participate in the real estate market. So talk to us about some of the systems, and then we'll maybe go deep on one or two of those.
Sure. I mean, I think that really, if you're trying to scale any type of business or just grow and do this as a volume, it gets much easier if you have the right systems in place. And, and the systems we were talking about before was that really they have to continually change, whether it's your, processing or insurance or construction and construction management, which I think people really underestimate the flipping business and the amount of like management that goes into it. A lot of people really think that it's more about finding the deals and having that as a system, and so you have a flow of business is really what most people focus on. But the meat and potatoes of the business is actually taking these properties and being able to efficiently get them fixed up quickly and then resold. And it's now going through and really creating all of these systems because my volume's increasing little by little. You have to keep revising those systems, and I've actually kind of forgotten how difficult and how time consuming it is to get through all that. And it gets frustrating at points because you think it's like, okay, we got this figured out. You go to the next level, and then also system's broken, right? Because you've either overwhelmed it or you need to bring someone else in, and you bifurcate certain duties and how that's going to happen, and dealing with the personalities of such that you've got to kind of maintain within that is challenging for sure.
And give me an example. I mean, flipping in particular, I personally empathize, which means I've done it and it hurts. I personally empathize with why systems are so necessary for doing flips successfully. And the acquisitions is fun. And that's everybody talks about the math on the acquisitions and how you do that. And, being able to build a network so you can do acquisitions. Very few people talk about the back end. Once you've got the property, what do you do with it? Because that's when it actually gets messy. That's when it's like, yeah, that's when systems are actually even more important, not less important, but even more important if you want to be able to have a sane mind and scale. So
yeah,
go ahead, Robert.
So I think the acquisitions is obviously a key part, right? And a lot of people end up like wholesaling some properties. I have a theory that really you should never turn off your spigot, right? So even if you're stopping buying, you shouldn't really tell anyone that you're going to stop buying, right? You just get the deals, because there might be a deal that comes across your plate that you're like, oh yeah, I have to buy that one. That's a really good deal. But the problem is that when you stop and you tell people that you stop, they go to the next name on the list and they start to basically call them, and then you're basically fighting your way back up to be number one. So if you're always the go-to person, if you can take the deal and it fits your book, your kind of model, then you should do the deal, or at the very least, wholesale it. I don't wholesale anything. I've not, we did it when we were at Anchor because we were buying a trustee sale, and we would give our clients the deals, and that was kind of, we'd feed ourselves, some business that way. But now I've taken the kind of stance where I just would rather pass on a deal than wholesale it, so that if I say yes to people, they know I'm 100%, I'm the buyer, we're going to go through, we're going to buy the property, and it's a done deal, versus having that kind of that air where, well, he won't close if he has to wholesale it, something along those lines. So I like avoiding all of that altogether.
Okay. One of the systems we were talking about at FIBI, I believe, if my memory is correct, is that we were talking about being able to be successful at bifurcating jobs. So give me an example of like a system you build. It can be, I'd love to see it on the back end of real estate, of flipping a piece of property, because that's where my learning curve was. I can handle acquisitions all day long. That's not hard. It was managing the crew and the timeline on the crew and who was going to do what when I had to bring in a second crew to be able to finish a larger project because the first crew just wasn't getting it done fast enough. So clearly I needed a second team. And now I have to bifurcate the job. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so that happens even now, right? Where we have issues with contractors, and really the goal is not to like, I mean, the goal is to obviously never have an issue. The one I'm actually sitting in front of is one that's going very, very smoothly. Like, you know, so every Thursday I have a kind of a weekly meeting where we just go over all of the properties. Mm-hmm. And this morning, you know, we got to this one and it's like, well, there's nothing really to talk about. It's just going really smooth, right? And so now I have stuff to talk about, right? But the systems for me on the construction side, I think, is that we do a very detailed full scope of work up front. And so we spend a significant amount of time having the scope of work so that there's a lot of clarity, and that helps projects like this just run much smoother. It also helps your contractors like account for everything that's being done, right? And so a lot of investors, sometimes they try to leave stuff out because they're going to try to get the contractor to just do things, you know, without necessarily getting billed for it. Okay. I get that. I take a different stance. You know, I would rather have them know, excuse me, everything that they're doing, and so that they can account for it from not just a time perspective, but also from a funding perspective. If they start getting tight, you know, that's when your job site starts to slow down. That's when your, you know, their labor cost goes up. And then at that point, it becomes much more difficult. And so I try to kind of make a win-win scenario. Some of the contractors I've worked with, you know, they've been contractors with me for 30 years already. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't stick around if they weren't making money. I'm very fair about all of that stuff, but I'm very realistic too. And one of the things about having everything done up front, it doesn't mean that you're going to go over budget. It just means that, okay, let's cut out certain things. Let's work within the budget. What can we do within this budget so that you're not constantly going over budget? And that's what I hear, you know, kind of across really the playing field. Most of the other kind of rehabbers, they generally will go over budget. Mm-hmm. They walk through a project and it's like, we can do this for $65,000. Well, you know, we can walk through and we're like, okay, 65,000. Our material cost is going to be 52,000. You're not going to get done for 65, right?
Exactly. We're not going to
yeah, let's back off of what we're doing so we can make the budget work. Right. You know, and like I'll give you an example. I've got one in Altadena right now. Our budget for the driveway and all the concrete work was 23,000. Our bids are coming in at 29 and 38,000 and 20, you know, like 30 something. We're like, all right, well, let's cut out what we were going to do. We're going to do all these pads. There's more forming. We were going to do these planter beds. Let's not make the planter beds out of concrete, of poured concrete. Let's do them out of like railroad ties. Let's figure other ways to still accomplish a similar look, mm-hmm. and cut the cost down. Okay. Right. Or let's cut down the size of the pad, or let's maybe do a deck instead of a concrete pad, you know, just things along those lines to figure out how can we still accomplish what we've got without cutting. And in this case here, we're probably going to have to cut a couple things out, but we'll bring it down to pretty close to the budget. Okay. Right. And I think the $29,000 guy is the guy who will probably end up getting the job, not because he's the cheapest, but basically because I think he's just going to work with us on some of the items that we want that are must-haves, and then try to incorporate some of the things that are already there to save some costs, whereas the other guys just want to rip everything out. So, right. So that's part of it, you know.
Okay. So in managing your schedule, like one of the things that becomes efficient in managing is managing schedules. It's one, and the reason why I'm doing that is not just because you need to manage schedules as far as timeline and cost. Like right. Time is the thing that costs you in real estate, right? But it also is, if you're very clear at being able to manage your schedule, you're also very clear being able to manage your peace of mind.
Right.
So let's talk about managing schedules, construction schedules, holding costs, which are associated with those construction schedules, which are eating you up while you're waiting for construction to get done. Like, let's talk about that.
Right. So, okay. So from a scheduling standpoint, part of that pre-meeting that we do with the contractor, we walk through and we game plan and really do a Gantt chart so that we can figure out where the trades are going to be. Because sometimes it's one contractor handling everything. Other times it's they're going to handle something and we're going to have other trades come in because maybe pricing is better. Flooring's a great example, right? A lot of the contractors, they sub out the flooring, they'll sub out certain things. And when they sub out those items, they're also marking it up. So if we have trades that we work with normally, we may bring them in for those to just stay on budget or stay on cost. And so there's more coordination that has to happen there, right? So having dates that are kind of target dates to be met is very important. Material is probably the second most overlooked item, right? Where people think it's like, okay, well, I'm going to order this, or they want to order everything all at once. Today at this house is a key example as to why you don't want to have everything here, right? There was a bunch of stuff stolen.
Yeah.
If we would have had everything here, we'd have to rebuy everything all over again. The other thing, I've tried that strategy thinking like, oh, this will be great. If you have too much stuff here, what happens is it actually slows them down because they're constantly looking for this stuff, right? Versus if they just start to buy things as they're going to need it for the next few days or for the week or whatever it is, that has been the most efficient thing. So, some of the first things that get ordered is a process for us. It's always like the shower or bathtub shower valves.
Mhm.
That's like everyone, like they wait, they get started, and there's like, oh, we need those.
We need
And
shower
then-
valves because we're doing our plumbing. Where does our plumbing need to go? Because we need plumbing before we close up walls, before we even
Right.
put the tub in. So yeah, all of a
Right.
sudden you need valves.
Exactly. So for us, that's one of the first things as soon as we close, just gets ordered, right? The next thing are items that might have a longer lead time, right? So like we've got really good manufacturers around here where we get stuff and we're not having to wait for a lot of stuff. Even during the like pandemic where there was a kind of disruption in that, we had enough vendors where we felt like it didn't really hurt us significantly. We did see some things that were taking longer, more on the appliance side. And we did get caught short where we thought, until it happens to you, you always just think it's like, oh yeah, it takes a week. We ordered a week out and they're like, well, it's 4 to 5 weeks. And we're like, oh shit, let's find out what else we can get.
Right.
So then you're scrambling, trying to find things. And you still do that to some degree, but we try not to get a lot of the finished items from either Home Depot or Lowe's, which I think are great sources for certain things. The online has gotten much better for Home Depot than it used to be. The selection's much more significant, whereas before it was like, oh, this is a Home Depot house, and it had kind of a bad connotation with it because it was just, all of the stuff that you would buy off the rack. Now their online warehouse has done, I think, a really good job of having a lot of stuff that you can find on Amazon or Lowe's or even some of the specialty sites that have much better options. So that's been helpful. I do try to buy a lot of things that are online just for the sake of tracking. It makes it easy. Plus, it gets delivered, and then the contractor doesn't have to spend hours trying to send us pictures. Okay, do you want this faucet or this faucet? And it's just a waste of time. So we take control of all of the design finishes, basically anything that someone would touch in the house, right? We order from our office standpoint. Anything that's rough, the contractor orders or they're responsible for. We do most of our bids with contractors as labor only bids or labor and rough materials only bid.
Okay.
And then they install the rest of the stuff is just labor on the installation of the items. Right. And so I think that having that type of clarity really helps. Not underestimating the job. I mean, I think really helps. A lot of these jobs, we'll kind of lower the pro forma to just account for everything and a buffer for it for some unknowns, but we try to cover most of the unknowns really in the walkthrough and that initial bidding process, which by the way is like that scope of work is probably, I would say it takes someone, even with the templates that we have already done.
Okay.
It still takes someone at least probably 20 hours to put together. I mean, it's a significant like undertaking, but those 20 hours up front, I mean, save you a significant amount of frustration and time on the back end, and it also helps with the contractors and their speed, because they can budget and they can account for the time of how long things are going to take.
So are you so specific about systems because you're trying to minimize the cost of time, or just for basically clarity and smoothness of the project, like peace of mind? Because for me, the systems were about managing cost of time.
Yeah, it's all about cost of time.
Okay.
And so even the systems where it's easier and it saves you time, right? And so, but especially right now when you're in a down market, the whole game is time. I mean, it is, if you're slow right now, you're losing money. You know, whereas before, if you were slow, you were making money and you thought you were a genius, even though you bought a shitty deal, possibly.
Yeah.
Right. So if the deal was bad and the market was correcting everyone's mistakes, well, right now it's amplifying your mistakes. So if you do something wrong, it really hurts a lot more. And you know, that's certainly we felt it on some projects, but it's part of the business, I think, you know.
So how do you manage permitting then? Because that's another thing that's really not inside of our control in my experience. Like permitting is like, I can call the permit office every day. I can be on a first name basis with the person that's, you know, that is the project team, the manager, right? The one that's walking it from office to office to make sure it all gets, you know, I even hire an expediter to be able to work with that, you know, and I can be 9 months, 12 months, 18 months. And that just destroys the timeline on my project when I have 6 months planned and it takes me 12 months, twice as long. And my holding costs are not inexpensive month to month.
Right. Yeah, I will say the permitting is still kind of an unknown. There are some techniques that you can use. A lot of the times, like let's say if it's a city that we're not familiar with, we here we had one in Laguna Beach where it was something simple. It wasn't a new construction, but it was we were opening up a window and needed to do some shear walling. There was gonna be structural stuff. And so just going through this whole process, you know, we found the guy that was like the guy in Laguna Beach, right? And so having the specialty guys that understand the city better, I think will save you some time. The fact that he had other projects going on, you know, like in LA, we have, you know, sometimes you have a lot of projects going on. And if I don't, I have clients that have a lot of projects going on. And other times it's just taking something that's already either semi-approved or has corrections, and they already have other meetings to get other corrections done, is to get the city to just say, hey, you know, here's this one. These were the corrections we needed. Can you just stamp this now too? And kind of just shoving it in. Depending on who you get, they will sometimes do it and sometimes they won't. In Laguna Beach, I could tell you it saved me a lot of time because they wanted us to submit the plans, which would have been a 3 to 6 month project or timeline.
Right.
We thought he could get this over the counter.
Right.
And the difference was he went to the city to go get approved over the counter. And then he left because the counter representative at that point, he knew would make him submit it. And he knew that the person that he was looking for would do it over the counter.
Right. Yeah.
So he left. I called him up. I'm like, hey, what happened today? He's like, oh, I didn't do it. I'm like, well, why not? And he told me exactly that. Went back the next day, got approved over the counter instead of having to submit it. And so having the right person and the right team member there, in that case, saved me probably 3 to 4 months.
Yeah. And it really is a big difference. And it really is because then you're talking about team and team management, right? Before we were talking about time and goods and materials and managing all that and the expectations with the team. Now let's talk a little bit about team management, and maybe, you know, we can talk about team management and flips, but I know you have some distinct opinions on like, how do you grow your team while you're growing your business? Because that's actually probably as complicated as being able to manage a team just day to day.
Yeah, I think that for me, at the point, like you have to make decisions to want to grow, right? Because it does get to a point where it's easier. And if you're happy with that level of growth or the income that you're producing already, then you don't have the need to change your systems, right?
Yeah, I'm guilty as charged. I'm that person. I'm that person right now, Robert. So you're talking to me right now. So you encourage me to get my backside busy again. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, but if you're making the decision to grow,
right,
then you know a lot of people they forget to invest in labor, and I'm guilty of this as well because I usually start investing in labor when I'm like crying uncle because I'm too busy. And I'm like, oh, this is terrible. And you shouldn't be, right? The point should be that you have the systems in place so that you aren't stressed and working too many hours and that you have a work-life balance, right? Yeah. And so for me, I figure it out a little bit later. It's always been one of my faults, you know, but I can see it in other people very, very easily. It's like, oh, this is what's going on because I've gone through that, right? And so I've seen that. And you know, and setting up those systems and you're basically planning ahead. So a lot of people didn't want to do it because labor is expensive. And so if their volume hasn't increased yet, or they don't trust that it's going to increase yet.
Right.
They
Why
don't want
buy
to invest
something
in it.
you don't need yet? Why spend the expense if you don't need it yet? Right.
Right. But if you want to get to that next level, you have to make that leap of faith. You have to take the steps forward to actually put that process in play so that you do grow. Otherwise, you get trapped. And that's what happens with a lot of people. They trap themselves.
They do. I've seen it many times in businesses. They trap themselves. And then in particular, because that can be that overwhelm, as you know so well, can go all the way from staff members to managers to CEO. But the CEO is actually overwhelmed and incapable of making the plan to be proactive about growing the business because they're just spending so much time running the freaking business.
Right.
But they can't even step back to be able to go, okay, I need to reassess the whole design of the business. And now what staffing do we really need? I've got one person here, but this is constantly and chronically a problem. That's not going to work. So what happens to people as a business grows? I mean, that's just the job, job expectations are literally changing. I mean, it's only once every several years, but still.
That's a challenge. And one of the things that you just hit on, I think is really key, is when the CEO is handling a lot of problems, the systems are already broken. And so the problem is that, you think that we're just going to hire and it's going to solve that time issue. But if you get to that point already, you spend most of your time putting out fires that you can't train the new staff that you bring in. So if you don't do this ahead of time, you get caught up in that cycle of always putting out fires. And then you lose the opportunity to actually take your company and be able to grow. And so that's why the investing in labor portion is so important. But when you look at, even when you're growing, the systems are changing and the roles are changing, you do go through personality issues. There's issues with employees that sometimes, or even partnerships, right? Where they feel like they're losing some control. There's some insecurity there, right? And hey, you're taking duties away from me. And people, most people instantly will kind of think it's like, oh, well, this isn't good. They're not happy with me. And they look at it as like a failure. When it's not a failure, it's like, hey, you've done so well. We've grown. And therefore, we need to bring this other person. And we're going to take this away from you so that you can flourish in this other part, right? Which you're already really good at. So it takes the managers to explain that better so that you don't have that issue. The people that are insecure with their job, they're going to be insecure with their job. And sometimes, even though they started off with you, they might not last in the long run, right? Because they may not like the change. They may not, share your vision. They think everything's fine and they like it the way it is. And sometimes in your business, you might be at a point where you have to either grow or shrink. Like where staying stagnant isn't an option anymore. And that was one of the issues that we had at the old company. And so you have to make those decisions.
And it is, like you said, I mean, you did cover this in the FIBI meeting. Like, it is like, you just got to accept it. Like, your job as the CEO, the one who's guiding the ship and being able to do it, is just being willing to go, it's not working. They're not happy. We're not happy. It's not working. They want to stay this way, or it's not a good fit, or once I bifurcate the job, it's going to be overwhelming, or there's no way to bifurcate it in a way that serves this person. You're the one who has to bite the bullet and just go, hey, we love you. Thanks for being here. But we got to move on. You got to be willing to do that. And that, to me, is hard.
It is hard. It is hard. We had a scenario where one of our managers she wanted to move up, and we weren't sure that she necessarily had the qualifications to do that. And so we didn't, and then she left. And it really caused a disruption. And she went to, I think it was Countrywide or somewhere, and she was running their whole department, because one of the things about hard money is it's very, very, very fast paced, right? And so she ended up coming back to us because she said, I'm bored there. And the culture there was, you're doing too much and you're making everyone else look bad. And she's like, I hate it.
Don't work hard.
Right. So she ended up coming back as a manager, twice the salary she left. And we're like, oh yeah, we should have kept her and given her the bump she wanted back then. Right.
Now we have to pay her more.
We didn't part of it is we didn't realize how good she was. Until she left, and we're like, oh wow, she was doing a lot. But that's a failure on our part, right? Because we didn't value that employee as much as we should have. And luckily, I mean, listen, we were very fortunate she came back to us and it helped.
Yeah.
But
Right.
that is one of the things that happens, right? You just have to look at things objectively. And sometimes if, when you're in this growth mode, the problem with not pre-investing in labor is that you start putting out those fires and then you blame someone else for that
Yeah.
because you had a system that was working and then broke and you don't realize it broke because you didn't invest in labor early enough.
You
Right.
described this so perfectly, Robert. This is why you're doing consulting work. I mean, tell me more about the consulting work that you've moved into. I know you may not be willing to divulge all of it. I know it's newer,
Oh,
but tell me more about the consulting work that you've got
well,
on the side.
so I've started putting together some small group kind of mentoring programs for like either beginners or experience and so forth. And we're just kind of tailor making them. So those are kind of in the process of forming as people sign up. But I've also been doing consulting for some national construction companies who are going to be entering the space or have entered it in a small way right now. Hard money lenders who need to look at their portfolio or need to figure out how maybe they can get more profitable. Some things that they're doing. Sometimes it's something very, very simple. We have a mutual friend, who was taking the easy route, and kind of when I looked at his business, I said, hey, well, if you simply hire one person, this one person at like $55,000 or $60,000 a year is going to make you 200, and it actually makes your portfolio better and safer.
Right.
He then kind of jumped up and he looked at it. He goes, you know what? You're absolutely right. And once he did it, it really helped propel his income significantly, I would say.
Yeah.
And a few other things that we kind of just did to tweak what he was doing. And and it just kind of works out. So a lot of times it's just, you get caught up in the business that you're doing and you're making money. And so you just look at that and it's like you repeat over and over and over again. And then you miss out on certain little things that with very small tweaks make you much more money.
And with your expertise and as an outside eye, you can go, oh, I do understand how the systems can work. Right. I understand, so you can look at it from the outs, being both somebody who has the experience and you're not in their existing business model. You're capable of going, oh yeah, I get it. Here's your line. Here's your problem. You may not see your problem, but I see your problem. And your problem is, you're assigning the wrong tasks to the wrong people, or you're double assigning tasks, or you're not holding accountability, or you haven't bifurcated a job that needs to be bifurcated, because you can see it from the outside without any attachment to the particular people in the positions or the brilliance of the system that's currently in place. I run into that. I would run into, hey, we put that system in place intentionally. I know my business model. And I'm like, I hear you, but your business has changed. So your model has to change. How can you accept that, even though you put that in place because of your experience and your knowledge? So
yeah, I remember when we were building the software for Anchor, we're going through, and the guy that came through said, okay, what do you want to accomplish? Great. And we're trying to describe the system. And he's like, you're trying to rebuild the system you already have. He's like, the point of doing this is to make it better. And he was absolutely right. And so he started looking at ways to automate a lot of the stuff that we thought, hey, we're automating this process. And he's like, why does a person need to do this, right? It's right. Let the system do this so that your people can grow into other positions. And he was absolutely right. And so part of that is then investing in technology as well. And so that's the next step, right? But that's all growth. And so if you're leveling up, you've got to do that. And for us, it was important because we had a planned exit, right? We had a goal to sell the company to do things. And so the company's not really worth anything if you have archaic systems and technology, and it becomes more valuable if anyone can run it. And like I have a client now who he's really understaffed and he doesn't realize that. As much as we've tried to point that out, he's like, well, you just can't find good people. And so right. And he has this expectation of that everyone should be at his level. And I'm like, you realize that they're here for you, they're working, but they're not going to kill themselves for you, right? That's your job. Like, you're going to do that. Yeah. And you have
your
high
baby, not theirs. I say this all the time. It's your baby, not theirs. You birthed it, they didn't.
Right. And for him, in his case, he has a very high expectation of what he expects, right? But he's got a high turnover. And I keep explaining to him, I said, listen, if you break the systems enough and you break it down to tasks that are so easy that almost anyone can do it, then you won't have as high turnover because it's an easy job.
Right.
Your expectation is for someone to do everything. And even though you break up this, okay, this is your accounting or your bookkeeper, that in itself can be broken down more, right? And maybe you have an ordering person instead of having your bookkeeper also order, right? And keep track of insurance and so he does enough volume where he needs probably 3 more staff members, but he refuses to do that. And he doesn't even refuse to do it. He's happy in trying to be right. Right.
Yeah, I understand. They
right.
do that. Yeah.
And so
I try very hard to not do that anymore. I try very hard not be attached to being happy to being right. I try to be very hard to be attached to being happy because I can see stuff moving. And it's not about me. It's about, did the system work? Okay, good. I got out of the way and now the system can work.
Well, I'll tell you what I found is that, we had created all these systems, and a lot of times, when you grow and you've got all these processes and all these reports that you want to have because you're protecting against a potential loss, that you end up losing track of how much those reports or that tracking actually cost you.
Yes,
and so at a certain point, we were tracking certain things that we're trying to protect, let's say, against something that might cost us 10 or 15,000, but the process that we put into place was costing us more than that potential loss.
Right.
And so all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, this is dumb. We're now spending $100,000 to try to track something to protect against something that might happen once every 2 or 3 years, and we'd lose 20, right? And so then it's like, okay, let's accept that as a risk, right, to be more profitable. And so some of that stuff you just have to relook at every so often.
Yep. All right. Let me ask you real quick. So real estate is a field that is going to be difficult. You're going to have problems. Today is a perfect example. You can plan, you can have systems, you can work it out. I know some longtime experts in the field that have very good plans and systems that they love using and they work well. And you still run into real estate being a pain in the patootie, right? Because I'm not allowed to use the other word. So tell me one of your stories about how it went wrong, how you fixed it, because fixing it is really our biggest job, and what it taught you or how it grew you up as an investor.
Yeah, I'll give you a live. I've got probably a handful of live scenarios right now, right?
Okay.
But something that's relevant that we talked about earlier, right, is when you have a contractor that starts being a problem, and then do you replace that contractor with someone else, or do you go forth and try to fix this contract? So this is a contractor. He's done several houses with us, and this one is going really slow. And so everything else has worked out okay. Someone a little slower, someone normal, hit timelines, everything was fine. But this one here is just at a crawl. And so going back and kind of looking at the process, some of it I think we caused, right? We were slow to order some things. And so he didn't pull his labor. He just had the labor doing other things there. So it ate up some of his labor budget. So now he's running short on labor money, and he's trying to finish it because we've got a relationship. And, I'm going to have a conversation with him later today about essentially just bailing him out of that scenario because I think we caused part of that problem.
Okay.
And so, going through, this is someone we can either try to basically kick him out of the project and bring in a new contractor, which is going to cost more because contractors don't like going behind someone else's work, right?
Yeah.
Or fixing a relationship, right? And an issue that came up here that I think is a, isolated incident that I think was either, because I think he went in with good intention. I think we went in with good intentions. And I think some of the things could have been ordered quicker. I think, he delayed on some things. I don't think we can take all the fault. I think he's got some fault.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, it's kind of like you try to solve the problem so you can go forward and do business again with someone who's already worked with you, understands your systems, understands the quality that you expect, or get rid of him and then start to work with someone new and train them all over again. In this case here, I think the smart decision is to kind of work it out, right?
Well, I think what's important is an isolated incident. Right. If it was a chronic thing, then you're dealing with a whole nother problem.
Right. And then maybe it's a system issue, right? The other thing in that same area, these are also houses that we bought And, we bought them at the very peak. Like there's, I think, 3 houses that we bought at the peak, right?
Okay.
So we closed in, I think, April.
Okay.
And so here we're in December. So that's how slow it is, right? Now, this is a full remodel, right? It's 300,000,
Okay.
or 300 and something, I think 325,000 on that house.
Okay.
And we basically took it down to the studs, and it's almost building a new house. In fact, I think building a new house is slightly easier
At
because
that
you're just
point,
following, yeah, well, it's all process, right? This is a series of, surprises that keep coming up, right? And so you got to deal with this. And the remodels just take a little bit, I think, longer when they're this like deep.
okay.
But what happened is we bought these based on the houses being worth 1,000 square foot, which is what they were trading for.
Yep.
And so if you look at the comps back then, they were a solid, 950 to 1,050 a foot.
Mhm.
Now they're trading at 800 to like 8.25, 850 if we're lucky.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a 15% drop in a matter of a few months. And I think that drop really happened over a 60-day period. It was very, very quick this time, unlike kind of what happened in 2008, which
Yeah.
really started in 2006 and kind of was dropping, and then
Drop,
and then
drop,
the hammer, yeah, and then the hammer dropped, right? This happened very, very quickly. Once you had that like kind of third, rate hike, the buyer mentality just stopped.
Right.
And so we had a stall in buyer activity, and then kind of values just dropped, right? And so, okay, we're buying these houses on, let's say on a cash basis, they're 15 to 18% margins, and you just lost all your profit, right? Just dropped. And so the houses aren't done.
10% margins,
Right.
right?
Well, I mean, look, I was buying, if they were levered, I would say down as low as like 7 or 8% margins at one point, right?
Yeah.
Because you work on tighter margins to get the deals and
Yeah.
be busy, and the market was increasing, so you thought you'd end up at 8 or 9, but you'd work off of your buy, right? I never really speculated. I don't like doing that. But when the market dropped here, it's like, okay, you're still putting out money, and in some cases you're putting out money where you're not going to get that money back, but you have to finish it. You can't sell it unfinished. You can back off of some of the things you're doing to kind of mitigate a little bit of that. But at the end of the day, it's, you're going to take some losses when the market shifts that quickly. And that's part of the business. And you just kind of have to be okay with it because, now listen, if that was your first deal, that sucks really bad, right? But when you had 2 years of phenomenal growth and profit that you didn't expect, then you go through that and you just say, okay, we're going to lose on 3 out of 30 or whatever the number is. So be it. You move on. And the other ones, you may have some that break even, and then you'll have some that win. But stuff we're buying today is better than what it was back then, even though the market's still kind of going through some adjustments in certain areas.
All right, Robert. So if real estate can give you a pain, it can be a pain, and it's going to work, and then it's not going to work, right? I always call it like the batting average, right? Thank goodness this is not the same as baseball batting average, because that would be
terrible, right?
That would be terrible, right? Like, so, hopefully it's 1 out of 10 that goes wrong, maybe, less. But why continue to use real estate to break through to your financial freedom? Why real estate if it's so tough?
I mean, so as tough as it is the easiest way to kind of really propel yourself without having to have massive investments into a prolonged business that you grow on really tiny. I mean, you think the margins are small in real estate. They're really small in a lot of other businesses as well.
Yeah.
And, and the expenses and the risk and the investment to get there is much greater. And the work product is usually much harder than real estate. Real estate is a business that I think anyone can do it, right? I mean, I have someone right now that I work with. She's a part-time real estate investor, full-time pharmacist, full-time mom, all of this other stuff.
Wow.
This makes her an extra, I mean, even next year, I think she'll still make an extra 150,000, even with the properties that she bought that are going to kind of be at a break even or slight loss.
Okay.
And had the market stayed the same, she would have made, I think, an extra probably double that, like 300,000 or something like that. So I think that for people that are out there and they're looking at what they want to do, or worse yet, they're already like kind of employees of real estate,
Yeah.
They just transition their mentality a little bit and get in real estate and work, like actually be in the business,
Yeah.
they'll make more money. It's always like a lot of the people that I'm I guess targeting for the coaching is I've got a lot of friends that are real estate agents or lenders and so forth. And part of doing this is that I see them, and transactional volume right now is down. I see people struggling. I see, I get approached for certain things privately, and you look at this and it's like, okay, you're really smart. Why aren't you doing better? And some of it is that they get lied to by their brokers. They get, if you look at like the brokerage model, they get paid on you getting listings and selling homes to buyers. Well, when the transactional volume has, really it's shrunk to like half of what it used to be. And then the available real estate agents have this new kind of generation of agents that are coming into the business now. So you've got twice as much competition for half as much business.
Right.
It makes it very difficult. So you have to look at like, okay, what's the offset here? What are you going to do now? And what's different? And they don't adjust. It's kind of a recipe for disaster in the long run. So I'm trying to get more people to be in the business because there is a significant amount of fixers that are going to start hitting the market. Well, I don't know if they're hitting the market. There's a significant amount of fixers that are coming of age, right? Okay. So by 2027, it's supposed to be like 4 million properties now that are in need of significant repairs. By 2030, it's even more significant. By 2028 to 2030, really what's happening is the baby boomers will start exiting. And the real question is, do the, Gen Xers and the millennials that are inheriting those homes that need work, are they going to fix them and keep them as rentals? Or will they just sell them and take their cash and run, or buy something else, right? And, money right now is on that. A lot of them are going to be sold. And so this fixer market, if you think you missed out on a great last 2 years, or well, previous 2 years. The last year's kind of been a little rough, right? The last 9 months.
Yeah.
But outside of that, if you missed out on the previous 2 years to that, you really missed out on a great opportunity, but it's not over. And I think that there's more opportunity coming. There's more fixers coming. So if you're not set up now, it's a great time to start getting educated and start making those plans to be able to capitalize on that kind of real estate industry, not necessarily just the fixers, whether it's wholesaling or apartment buildings and buying and holding. I think that it's prime to start doing that. And the national companies that I'm consulting with they kind of share the same data, and they look at that and they say, yeah, we see that writing on the wall.
Okay. Tell me, what does financial freedom mean to you? What does a financially free day mean to you, or what does it mean to you?
Well, I mean, here at the end of the day, it's not having to worry about my car just broke down. How am I going to pay for it? Having the ability to have free time to go either travel or spend time with your kids, or not missing an open house or like in my case, a gymnastics meet, or, when they were younger, a soccer game, a basketball game, or a baseball game. I went to all of them, and that's basically the ability of having the right systems and also having the financial, wherewithal to be able to do that. And that's because, listen, I'm 51 now. I started when I was 17, and you sit there and you look at this business, and I will say that I've had a great life, but at this point, I think, sharing some of the stuff that I used to not share, even though I was sharing everything, you'd always hold back a little bit, right? And now I'm really not worried about that. I'd like to get and basically pass on the stuff that I learned, so it helps other people. It's the way I got taught. I got taught by other people mentoring me, and just, I didn't even really realize they were my mentors, but they were, at the time. And it's like, oh, wow, that made sense. And then they retired out and so forth. And it's changing. There's a lot of youth coming in that there's a lot of things that they can do much better than we could do because they understand technology better. Yeah. Right. And they'll make things easier. And so I don't know. For me, it's basically, it's at the end of it, it's just freedom for certain things. And, probably a little bit of ego. It's fun to have some fun stuff, so that's not a bad thing either.
Well, one of the things that you said, which is probably the first time I've ever heard it, but I don't know if you know that you said it, was being financially free has also allowed you to go, I can just give it all away. I can now consult and I don't need to hold any piece back. Like really, I can tell you every single system that was ever successful because I kind of don't care anymore. I'm good. How do I make you good? Right. And there's this freedom that shows up with the financial freedom of really digging in and being a completely transparent mentor.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you're going to take on that mentor role or that consultant role, at the point where someone's paying you for your time and your knowledge, you can't hold back. It's unfair to them for you to hold back. I think ethically, if you're getting paid for it, you should give them all you got.
Yeah. And just tell them the truth. Give them all you got and just tell them the truth. Absolutely. Inspire them, cultivate them, but to give them all you've got.
Right.
All right. So how do people get a hold of you, Robert? If they're looking to get a hold of you, whether they got a property in your area, they want to know more, they want to consult with you.
So you can go on robertfragoso.com, and that's probably the easiest way. You can email me at robert@robertfragoso.com. It's Fragoso. Is the spelling for the last name. Or you can text 949-572-4468 is the other easy way.
Say it again.
949-572-4468.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you. Thank you for keeping your commitment to record this podcast, even though you had a problem at one of your properties. I'm like, why are you in your car? I'm confused. But thank you for keeping the commitment. Thank you for showing up, and thank you for just, being you.
You got it.
Really appreciate it, Robert.
You got it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.